Hey everyone, Mike from Videomaker here. We've got a brand new video review for you here, a product category which we haven't really covered before. It's a color correction input device called the Tangent Ripple. It's basically a tool for Adobe Premiere and Resolve, as well as a few other applications that kind of come with a caveat. And we're going to try to answer the question, is this something that every video editor really needs? So we're going to go through this and talk about basically what it is and kind of why it exists and why people would want to use it. And we'll talk about our experiences in Premiere and Resolve, and then I'll go over basically the pros and cons, the strengths and weaknesses of the Ripple, and give my recommendation on who should really use it. So stay tuned. Okay, so what is the Ripple? Basically, it's an input device that controls your color wheels, your three-way color corrector in Premiere or Resolve, or like I said, maybe some other applications with a little bit of a hack. It basically has 3 trackballs designed to control the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights, and that's the hue of each. It also has 3 dials, which control the luminance of the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. And now there are 8 other buttons as well, so each of the 3 sections has 2 buttons that reset the dial and the trackball, and then there are 2 kind of assignable buttons in the middle that you can apply to a few different things. So why would you want to use something like this? Well, the fact of the matter is if you're working on a big project and you take color really seriously, you're going to spend a good amount of time going through each shot to make sure the color is just right. Now, if you can manipulate multiple parameters at the same time, you might shave off, I don't know, 10 seconds per shot. And if you're working on a project that has 1,500 shots, you can see how that can really add up. So when you're using these trackballs, you can think about the fact that you can keep your hands, both hands, on the device and moving multiple parameters simultaneously. So basically, if you're doing a lot of color work, this thing can really speed up your workflow. Also, it kind of just makes it a little bit more fun in the process. Now, these kinds of products have existed on the high end for a very long time. Tangent has multiple input devices for this kind of thing, but the next one up is about $1,100, so it's really not something that's good for enthusiasts or beginners. This one goes for $350, so if you love color but you're working on a budget, this could be a good option for you where you may have had no option before. Now, we tried this in a few applications, but let's start with Adobe Premiere. Now, basically, once you install the Tangent software, all you got to do is fire up Premiere and it works just straight out of the box. It's tied to all the controls you need, but you do need Premiere CC 2015.3 or better. Now, if you have an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, or you subscribe to just Premiere out of the box, you're going to get the newest version anyways, but you might want to go ahead before you open the program just to make sure you've updated, you're at the newest version possible. Once you're in though, it will tie to the shadows, midtones, and highlights in Lumetri color just straight out of the box, like I mentioned. As well, you can go into the Tangent Mapper and remap any of the buttons you like and change the sensitivity. Now, that's where basically the strength of working with Premiere is. In the Mapper, you can basically assign any of the buttons to any of the commands in Premiere. It's really nice. So for our setup, we changed the A button to be a toggle for sensitivity, so we could go from highly sensitive to not very sensitive. And the B button we remapped to bypass. Basically what that allows us to do is, as we're editing, we can hold the B button and it'll go back to the original, so we can do quick before-after comparisons in Premiere. Now, the downside is Premiere has pretty small, low-resolution color wheels inside Lumetri. And as a result, basically when you're using the trackballs, the changes that you make are kind of, the best way I can describe it is jittery. When you move it, you can really feel every pixel of change. And as a result, it's not the smoothest operation when you're working with color. Definitely not as smooth as Resolve, which we'll get to in a minute. But the big advantage is it works really well with Lumetri. It works right out of the box. And as soon as you switch to color mode, you're using this thing easy. Now, next, let's move on to Resolve. Resolve is a little bit more rigid than Premiere in terms of how it works with the Tangent. Basically, you fire up the application after installing the mapper, just like I mentioned before with Premiere, and it maps everything just right the same way. However, the big downside is the remapping of controls is way clunkier. In fact, when I say clunky, I mean kind of super rigid, as in you can't change anything. You open up the remapper and it says, sorry, you can't remap the keys here. You can go into Resolve and check the preferences there. But when you do go into the preferences, the only options you're given are the sensitivity of the trackballs and the dials, which is great. They're basically set up to be really granular adjustments to sensitivity. However, the buttons can't be remapped. Now, B button is applied to bypass, just like we manually did it in Premiere, so great, hit the B button and we can bypass and go look at our originals and do the before-after comparison. The A button is not used in Resolve at all, which is kind of strange, that not only is it not used, but you can't even remap it. And considering that the Ripple actually doesn't have very many buttons compared to, you know, its bigger brothers like the Element and the Wave, it's really kind of weird. That's the big downside to working in Resolve. The upside is the color wheels in Resolve are very big and high resolution, and as a result, using the trackballs feels so much better than Premiere. Like, the Ripple really feels like an extension of your hands when you're working in Premiere. It just feels great and makes the whole experience very, very nice. But the fact that you can't remap it kind of sucks. Now, when we're talking about the pros and cons of the Premiere application and its interaction with Ripple and Resolves, we can't really blame any of that on Tangent. It's kind of the rigidity of each software. So we prefer, actually, given all that, the Ripple with Resolve because of how great it feels once you're in there with those high resolution color wheels over Premiere. But fortunately, Resolve is free, so if you're a Premiere user, just download Resolve and you can use it. Otherwise, you know, it's kind of a subjective assessment. So other people may like Premiere better for the flexibility that the key remapping gives you. Now, let's talk about more general pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses of Ripple. Now, one of the biggest weaknesses, which, you know, is kind of understandable given this is an entry-level device, is the fact that there just aren't very many buttons. You know, the biggest thing that we missed when we're editing like this is there's no way to navigate the timeline or the editing interface without taking your hands off of Ripple and putting them back on the mouse and keyboard. So, you know, the workflow is a little bit, you know, bumpier along the way because you're kind of shifting back and forth. If we really had 2 more buttons, it would have been perfect because we could at least go to previous edit, next edit, and jump, you know, from clip to clip. But here we are. You know, I guess by the time we add up all of the things on our wish list like that, and, you know, maybe a saturation dial and maybe a way to navigate the editing interface, well, we'd be up at the next level of the Tangent input devices anyways. So, you know, got to keep the price down. We got to keep it an entry-level product after all. But boy, it would be great to have those 2 extra buttons. Other than that, not really a strength or a weakness, but the body is very lightweight and very plasticky. In fact, I can kind of, better than describing it to you verbally, I'll just play this sound effect and you should be able to understand what it feels like to manipulate this thing just based on this. Now, that really doesn't have any impact on, you know, how you use the device. The feet underneath the Ripple are actually pretty grippy, so once it's on a surface, even though it feels like it's really lightweight and it should slide around as you're using it, it actually plants pretty firmly in place. So that's more of a perception thing, really. Like I said, not a pro, not a con, but there you have it. One thing we thought was a con and ended up being kind of a pro is the resistance on the trackballs. So when you take it out of the box and you set it down, you put the trackballs in place and you start to use them, like the body itself, it feels kind of plasticky, and when you roll them, it has kind of a plastic on plastic sound and feel. You know, it's not like we're talking about frictionless ball bearings or anything like you might expect. However, it turns out that once you get in and you start grading, especially if you're like us and you put on headphones, you start to listen to music, or you're listening to your project, when you can't hear the plastic on plastic sound, the resistance in the trackballs is actually pretty much perfect. You know, when you're rolling these things around, you don't want to lift your hand up and have the trackball continue to roll because, you know, you want your cursor to stop when you lift your hand up, and it does exactly that. So, like I said, we thought it was a con when we opened it up and we felt, oh, this is kind of plasticky, cheapy, but it actually ended up working really well. And speaking of pros, the feel of the trackballs and their build quality and the dials is very, very nice. The trackballs themselves are hefty, to say the least. They're not light and plasticky like the body of Ripple. Also, the dials themselves have a nice fluid motion and just the right amount of resistance. It feels really great. No plastic on plastic feel there at all. It just is very, very, very nice. And besides that, even considering the fact that, there's a couple fewer buttons than we'd like, it did achieve our results or our goals of speeding up color workflow, because we could do things like, adjusting the hue of the shadows while simultaneously bringing up, the luminance of the highlights. So in that sense, it did succeed. Now, would it have been nice if we didn't have to take our hands off and go to the keyboard or mouse? Yeah, it would have. In fact, we would probably be a little quicker if that was the case. But that doesn't mean that we didn't actually save time by using the tools that were in front of us. So who really is Tangent Ripple for? I would say, I can see independent filmmakers, travel videographers, corporate videographers, documentarians, event videographers, all using this to quite a bit of benefit. Anyone who basically has to pay attention to the color and make sure the color is very nice. What it boils down to is, if you are the type of person that goes through and color corrects and grades every single shot in your project, you will absolutely get benefit out of the Ripple. If you're a YouTuber, or you're making home videos, or if you're a journalist, maybe the color correction in general isn't as important to you. And as a result, even if you're doing sort of one-off color correction in your projects, like fixing a shot that was clearly broken, like the white balance is off, then you probably aren't going to get the benefit out of Ripple. In those cases, just use your mouse and keyboard and fix it, and then output your project. But if you are the kind of person that takes color very seriously, and you do look at every single shot, absolutely you will get your money's worth out of Ripple. Like I said, it's a $350 product. So it is going to be of benefit to those people who really need to work on color quite a bit. Is it for everyone who's editing video? No, it's not. But it is for anyone who really takes color seriously. And for that reason, we do recommend the Tangent Ripple. So there's our review. Hope it was helpful. If you want to buy the Ripple, we've got a link for it in the description, as well as a link to the Ripple's bigger brother, the Element. That's the $1,100 upgrade, essentially. You'll get tons more buttons there. So if you want to support Videomaker, check that out. Also, I want to refer you to a course we've got on color correction and grading. If you do take color very seriously, but you don't actually know how to do color correction and grading, and you want to learn, check out that course. There's lots of great information that will teach you how to do it on a professional level. If you want to buy this shirt, too bad, we're not selling it, but maybe you can find it at Target or something. But that's it. Until next time, I'm Mike. Bye-bye.